Welcome to Nashville Songsmiths. I'm your host, Ty Hager, replaying some great interviews with #1 country songwriters originally aired on the American Forces Radio Network. This week is part 1 of my 4-part interview with hit songwriter Tony Arata, recorded in Nashville.
Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance.
One thing I wanted to say right off the top, Tony, is that you know that nowadays you can miss the pain and still be able to do the dance.
You've never seen me dance.
So you moved here quite a while ago.
1986.
Right out of you were going to journalism school.
Yeah, I graduated from Georgia Southern University down in Statesboro, Georgia in '80, and then began dating the woman who became my wife, Jamie, that summer. And we married in 1984, and in 1986 I came home. We were living in Thunderbolt, Georgia, and I came home and found out that my wife had called and Jamie had given our 30-day notice that we were leaving. And I found out from the landlord that we were moving to Nashville. So that's how I found out about it.
So it was a surprise to you.
Oh,
now, was this because she had such confidence that you were going to be a big songwriter?
Well, I love my hometown. There's just not a real big original music scene. And so I got fired more than I got hired, because if you're not playing cover songs, then you just don't have a long...
Which is the way it is in all but like maybe
a few
5 cities in America.
Right. So there's only a few choices you have.
Right.
And Jamie knew if I was really going to pursue songwriting, we had to go somewhere where obviously they don't look at you like you've got leprosy when you tell them that you're a songwriter, that you've come to town for this, and that's what everybody else does too. So Nashville was the natural choice, and
because we are the leper colony of songwriters.
Well, I tell you what, sometimes I feel like it, but no, we moved here in '86, and on Halloween night, I thought it was fitting. We didn't know a soul and had done no reconnaissance or anything like that, but knew that we had to go somewhere. We told all our family farewell, and we moved.
Now, how many songs had you already written when you made the move?
Well, I had actually had some chart success with a fellow by the name of Jim Glaser, who used to be in the Glaser Brothers band.
Exactly.
And
one of the original...
sang background for Marty Robbins.
Right.
And that was in '82 and '83. He recorded some of my songs, and I actually had some songs on the radio. I had a song on the radio called Man in the Mirror, and that he did that actually went in the top 20. But in my supreme genius, of course, we waited till all that faded and then moved to town.
Right.
So when we had a calling card, we stayed put in Thunderbolt.
Strike while the iron's cold.
That's right. The story of my life. So when we moved here, all that had long since faded, and but it was actually, I guess it's the way it's supposed to be. You just come here and you get in line with everybody else, which is what we did.
I know that you used to play the open mic at
the Bluebird Cafe,
and also at
Douglas Corner,
and Bogies as well, didn't you? Back when Bogies was over in like Lion's Head Village or something, right?
Yeah, that was the very first time I ever worked up the nerve to go out and play an open mic show. And of course, at all these things, they always had a very special guest. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. I finally worked up the nerve to go up there and play, and I'm up on stage and I'm sweating and shaking, and I look down, and Townes Van Zandt was the special guest that night.
Wow.
And he's sitting at the table, and I cannot tell you how unimpressed he was with what he heard. And all I could think about was, all right, if you live through this, the rest is gravy. It can't get any worse than this.
There's a good chance he was just loaded.
Well, all I could think about was the fact that how many times I've ruined this poor man's song, Pancho and Lefty, and I've sung it, every day of my life when I've played in bands. And, but anyway, I lived through that, and I did. Douglas Corner was my home away from home. I went to Of course, Jamie and I didn't have kids at the time, so we were at every open mic show. And,
right.
And my dear friend Jelly Roll Johnson, who's a great harmonica player, was the one soul who moved here that we knew. And he accompanied me on many, many nights playing for the bartender and whoever was passed out at the table. And, you know, anywhere there was a place with a sign-up sheet, I went out and did. And as a matter of fact, it was at Douglas Corner that I walked in one night at one of these open mic shows and stood at the back. And there was a guy up there with a big cowboy hat and a striped shirt and looked like a cowboy sitting up on a stool. And it was Garth. And he had just moved to town as well. So we struck up a conversation that evening, and I've known him ever since. Of course, at the time, he wasn't a one-word entity. He was, I remember the song he was singing. He was singing "I've Got a Good Thing Going," which wound up on his first record. And I stood at the back and I said, now that guy, that's just what we need. Another guy that writes real well and sings real well. But I met him as a songwriter. And as I said, we struck up a conversation that night, and I've known him, you know, ever since, and through a lot of different facets of our respective lives. I mean, his oldest girl was born a day after our oldest girl was born, and we were in, I remember seeing him at Baptist Hospital, and so there's been a lot of different changes in both of our lives, but he's always been the same guys that I met. But I'll never forget, it was at the I had written the song The Dance and did it one night at another one. We actually worked our way up to doing the early show at the Bluebird. Mm-hmm. And it was me and Garth and Liz Hingber and Mark Irwin. And that was about it. That was not only the people performing, that was the crowd.
And now that I didn't know the way it all would end, the way it all would go.
He came up to me afterwards and said, "Pal, if I ever get a record deal, I'm going to do that song." And, of course, I appreciated it, and I thanked him for the vote of confidence, but he was selling boots at Boot Country, and I was loading trucks at UPS. So I knew we had the music industry right where we wanted it.
So,
and it was just a matter of time. But sure enough, about 2 years later, I had finally worked my way into getting a degree in a job in my field. I was writing for a magazine, and I got a call, and Garth called me and said, "I just got signed to Capitol Records, and is that song still available?" So, true to his word, he called for it and made a wonderful record out of it. But the strange part is that anything that happened with that, I mean, was purely happenstance. I mean, it wasn't anything that was some grand design or great plan, that you could lay your finger on that I knew this is exactly how it was going to work. It just happened to be with exactly the right guy and exactly the right bunch of players and the right producer, Alan Reynolds, who was also a songwriter. Mm-hmm. So it was just, I was very lucky.
Well, I was going to ask, was that still one of those songs that when you wrote it, did you think, that's pretty good? Or did you really have confidence that if the right things happened, that it could be a pretty successful song?
Well, the odd part about it is I've sung the song every night since I've written it, wherever I've played. And
so you got it memorized now?
Long before. I've almost got the words memorized. Yeah. But the strange part is that it had been turned down in that interim. I mean, between when he heard it at the Bluebird and when he called a couple of years later and had been signed to Capitol. So in those years, that song was continually being pitched and was being passed on by the biggest and the best in town. And but I believed in the song. I thought that there was something there, and the reaction it got from the lay folk,
sure,
I knew there was something there. Oddly enough, I was told on more than one occasion that nobody was going to record it because it didn't have a bridge. It's just a verse, chorus, and you're done. And so I tried to write a bridge, and it seemed so foreign to the song, having sung it for so many nights in its format. I finally had to just say that I don't think it's supposed to have one.
Did you ever try doing a bridge with a banjo in it?
I tell you what, at that time of my life, I would have tried anything, a bassoon or whatever.
Little ukulele?
Whatever you got.
Of course, they're all little ukuleles.
But it was just one of those things. Finally had to make a decision that I thought I was done with the song, and that's what it was going to be. And oddly enough, in the years that passed, Garth came up to me and said, "You know what I always liked about the song is there was no bridge." And so every once in a while, idiots like me, every once in a while, you finally come to the right decision and the right conclusion, and stick by your guns and just and go with the song as is.
You can find many more interviews with hit songwriters at NashvilleSongsmiths.com. I'm your host, Ty Hager. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll join us next week on Nashville Songsmiths.